At present, it's widely assumed that science and religion are mutually contradictory. This assumption is far from true, and in this video we will discuss why that is the case. We will discuss how modern science came out of Christian theological assumptions, and therefore it should be called a Christian science. The term modern science emphasizes the temporal origins rather than the ideological assumptions. Although the name is not false, it is also not very helpful. It is like calling a car the invention of 1886. Yes, the car was invented in 1886, but by calling it that, we don't understand a car. Similarly, if we want to understand science, then we have to know its core assumptions. In this video, we will discuss how those core assumptions are Christianity. The word science just means an understanding of the world. The word religion just means an understanding of the self. World understanding comes from self understanding. A world image is created from a self image. A different self image produces a different world image. Religion gives us a self image, and science gives us the world image. If the self image is perfect, then the world image is also perfect. Therefore, we can ladder these self and world images from imperfect to more perfect to most perfect. The perfect science and religion explains everything about the self and the world. The less perfect science and religion explains fewer things about the self and the world. The imperfect science and religion doesn't explain most things about the self and the world. Science and religion are therefore connected not just historically, as in the case of modern science, but eternally in case of all conceivable sciences and religions. All sciences come out of some religious ideology. Modern science came out of a Christian ideology about the self, and the Vedic science comes out of a Vedic ideology about the self. Since there are infinite ideologies about the self, therefore there are infinite possible sciences. They can be laddered based on how well they explain and work. By extending our self image to a world image, we can test if that self image is correct. The story of modern science begins with Enlightenment when Europeans decided to break away from the intellectual hegemony of the Church. The worldview of the Church was rooted in its faith in the Bible and Jesus, and the Church stated that those who believe in the Bible and Jesus would go to eternal heaven after death, while those who don't believe in Bible and Jesus would go to eternal hell. Enlightenment thinking decided to break away from hell and heaven and focus on the earth. Therefore, there are valid reasons to say that science and religion are contradictory. However, the break between Enlightenment thinking and the church wasn't so stark as is often made out to be. Enlightenment thinkers carried forward many of the core assumptions of Christianity, such as the depersonalization of nature, the separation of one individual from other individuals, and the concept of law drawn from the idea of Christian covenants. The novelty of Enlightenment was the assumption that nature is governed by mathematics. Enlightenment thinkers did not give up the idea that God created the world. They added the idea that God was a mathematical thinker. They claimed that God was a rational thinker, mathematics was the highest kind of rationality, and therefore God must be a mathematical thinker. Therefore, when God created the world, he must have created a mathematical universe. The mathematization of the universe in turn depended on the depersonalization of nature, the separation of individuals, and a system of laws based upon the idea of religious covenants, all of which were taken from Christianity. Therefore, the core assumptions of Enlightenment were rooted in Christian theology. Prior to European Enlightenment, mathematics had been used for city planning and architecture in many parts of the world. In India, mathematics was used to calculate planetary positions, which were then used to calculate time very accurately, which was then used for precisely executing Vedic rituals. However, nowhere in the world did anyone claim that the whole of nature was mathematical, or that mathematics was the highest form of rationality, or that God was a mathematical thinker. All these are creations of Enlightenment thinking. How Christian theology led to the Enlightenment ideas, which then led to modern science, is rarely discussed at present. Most students of science think that science broke away from religion rather than being created from it. To better understand the roots of modern science in Christian theology, we have to look at European history. We know today that Greeks and Romans were practicing polytheistic religions before 500 BCE. Historians have studied the similarities between Greek, Roman, Babylonian, and Egyptian systems of gods and found significant overlap between them. Not many people have studied the connection between these polytheistic religions and the Vedic system at present, primarily because Europeans want to trace their history back to their lands rather than farther away from it. The crucial departure from this polytheistic religious society began around 500 BCE due to a group of philosophers that are today called pre Socratic philosophers. Among them are names such as Parmenides, Heraclitus, Zeno, and Anaximander. All these philosophers began what we can today call the Greek Enlightenment, namely, a break away from polytheistic religions to conceptualize the world based on logic and mathematics. The trend started by pre Socratic philosophers, solidified with Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. A new worldview emerged, which is today called Greek philosophy, under which the world had to be understood rationally, observationally, and mathematically. Mind, soul, God, demigod, ritual, temples, etc., were excluded. Around 200 BCE, what we call monotheistic Judaism emerged in Israel. While this is another big topic, to note it briefly, even the inhabitants of Israel and surrounding regions were practicing polytheistic religions before 200 BCE. The Middle Eastern religions share a lot of commonalities with Greek, Egyptian, Roman, and Babylonian systems of gods. This history is important because Jews originated the concept of covenant law. Social laws had previously been created in Greek times. Geometrical shapes and numbers were supposed to follow the laws of geometry and arithmetic. But covenant law elevated the idea of law to a divine agreement between man and God. Those who followed the covenant law were called the people of God and good people. Those who did not follow the covenant law were not the people of God and were sometimes considered evil. In some cases, they were also called the followers of the enemy of God, namely Satan. Within this atmosphere of laws, Jesus was born, and from him Christianity developed. However, Jesus never spoke about laws. He instead spoke about love and brotherhood, duty and sacrifice, and leading a simple life with devotion to God. However, when early Christianity spread to Europe, the teachings of Jesus were married to the Greek and Jewish concepts of laws. Christians now started saying that Jews have one divine covenant with God, but God had decided to forego the previous covenant with Jews and establish a new divine covenant with all of humanity through Jesus. Since Jews did not agree with this assertion, therefore great enmity between Jews and Christians ensued, which led to the persecution of Jews by Christians for many centuries afterwards. While Jews were extremely wary of Greek and Roman cultural influence on their society, Christians overturned that cultural separation. They wholeheartedly adopted Greek philosophy, accepted the Roman ideas of priests and nobles, embraced Greek and Latin as their language, and began transforming European society from within. This is how Christianity works even today. When Christians enter a new society, they accept the local language and customs, marry their ideas with the local ideas, and try to transform the new society toward Christianity from within. A lot of tactical maneuvering is required, and Christianity accepts it as a necessity for the purposes of spreading Christianity. Christians were successful through this method when Roman rulers accepted Christianity as their official religion. Thereafter, Christianity spread throughout Europe by the power of the sword rather than the power of love and brotherhood, which Jesus had taught previously. But after the collapse of the Roman Empire in the 5th century, a power vacuum was created in all the places that Romans had ruled over previously. In Europe, the vacuum was so complete that the people completely forgot about Greeks and Romans and broke up into warring clans and tribes and went back to their polytheistic religions. The same happened in the Arab world. Without a centralized, powerful ruler, they went back to polytheistic religions and broke up into hundreds of tribes. In this power vacuum, Islam was born as yet another monotheistic religion to displace polytheistic religions and unify people under a single monotheistic God. Islam quickly conquered the Middle East region, and then it started spreading to northern Africa and southern Europe. Just like Christianity had established a church after the Romans accepted Christianity, similarly, Islam created institutions for teaching and expanding its ideology. These institutions studied the works of Greek philosophers and translated them into Arabic. They learned about mathematics from India and accepted a numeral system, presently called the Arabic numerals. Then they tried to synthesize Islam with Greek philosophy and Indian mathematics and came up with a comprehensive system that is today known as Islamic philosophy. Due to the development of a comprehensive system, Islam portrayed itself as an intellectual and scientific society in contrast to Europeans who had forgotten Greek philosophy and mathematics. Very soon, a clash of civilizations followed, and Arabs and Europeans started fighting religious wars called crusades. They liberated the parts of Europe under Islamic rule and then proceeded to create a Christian philosophy just like Islamic philosophy. They revived the forgotten Greek and Roman cultures, and all this intellectual, cultural, and religious revival came to be known as Renaissance, which means revival. Since Renaissance advocated the revival of pre-Christian Greek and Roman cultures, therefore it weakened the power of the church over European society. Church wasn't the sole means of truth anymore. There were other sources such as philosophy and mathematics. With the weakening of the church came the Protestant Reformation, under which many Christians broke away from the Roman Catholic Church and established a new Christian denomination, presently called Protestantism. Protestants encouraged secular subjects like mathematics, philosophy, and medicine. The tipping point in this development came when Copernicus was sentenced to death by the Catholic Church for saying that the earth revolved around the sun. Galileo, who supported Copernicus, also underwent persecution, although he wasn't sentenced to death because he rationalized his inquiry into the working of nature as an inquiry into the working of God's mind. It is then that Protestants began serious attempts to lay a solid foundation for rational and empirical inquiry about the working of nature within the theological framework of Christianity. These new attempts are today known as Enlightenment. They are portrayed as a breakaway from religion, when it was a continuation of the breakaway from the Catholic Church. They are portrayed as the resurgence of reason over faith, when that had already begun during the Renaissance. They are portrayed as the dawn of mathematics, when mathematics was received from Greeks and Indians. The main contribution of Enlightenment was to lay a philosophical foundation for rational and empirical inquiry into nature that was not opposed to Christianity, even if it was opposed to the Catholic Church. It involved the separation of mind and body, the claim that body was governed by mathematical laws while the mind was governed by moral laws, that science pertained to the body while religion pertained to the mind, that God was a mathematical thinker to have created a mathematically governed body, that the concept of covenant law could be extended to the natural world to create input output covenants between bodies, just like the give and take covenants between man and God, that the exploitation of nature was already ordained by God when he had allowed Adam dominion over the world, that the body could be created as independent objects like the mind was created as independent persons, and so on. If science was the new child being born, Christianity was the mother of the child. The birth of the child is sometimes painful to the mother. So it was for Christianity. Today, people talk about the pain endured during the birth of science and assume that because science was born with great difficulty to religion, therefore science must be independent of religion. The fact is that religion gave birth to science painfully. To better understand the influence of Christianity on science, we can take the idea of natural law or the laws of nature. Ideas of natural law appeared during Greek times when Greeks thought that order was immanent in nature. Christianity, however, changed the idea of natural order to a law imposed by God. The natural law was not inside matter, but imposed upon nature from the outside. To understand the difference between these two conceptions of natural law, we can ask a simple question. Why are the laws of nature precisely what they are? Why are they not something else? For example, if E equals mc squared is a law of nature, then why this specific law and no other? In principle, the law could be E equals mc or E equals mc cubed. Why does it have to be E equals mc squared? Greeks would have tried to explain all laws based on some sufficient reason which was rational and the immanent nature of the world. Through that reasoning, they would establish the necessity of the law. Christianity had a problem with necessity because most of its claims could not be proven to be necessary. For example, we can ask, why did God have to sacrifice his son to relieve mankind of its sins? Even if he wanted to end the sinning and suffering, why should God not expect an end to sinning before putting an end to suffering? Isn't it the case that if we don't like the effect, then we have to end the cause of that effect? Why should God put an end to human suffering by sacrificing his son who had done no sins? Isn't that contrary to all principles of justice and morality? The immanent conception of law which prevailed during Greek times requires us to give rational justification for everything. Therefore, if God created the world in a certain way, we should be able to question why he did that in a specific way. We should explain why the law is something specific and not something else. Rationality means that God could not do whatever he felt like doing. He had to do only that which was sufficiently justified and rational. Questions of necessity and sufficient reason open up a new set of problems that Christianity could not deal with. Therefore, Christian theologians called rationality, sufficient reason, and the desire to establish the necessity of laws a challenge to God's omnipotence. They stated that if God's actions had to be justified based on reason, then God could not be the absolute monarch of the world. An omnipotent God can do whatever he feels like. He doesn't have to justify his actions based on reason or necessity. Therefore, we should not seek necessity in why God does something. When God created the laws of nature, we cannot question why he created the laws in a certain way. This idea is called divine voluntarism. It means that God willed the world to be in a certain way. He created the covenants of religion, he created the laws of nature. We cannot ask why the covenant is a certain way and not another way. We cannot ask why the laws of nature are only one way and not another way. In the domain of human affairs, the same idea is called ethical voluntarism. It means that humans can choose to be governed by whatever law they want to be governed by. The ideas of morality, virtuosity, rightness, wrongness, etc., have no innate rationality according to voluntarism. They can be whatever we want them to be. Due to ethical voluntarism, if two theories are equally good explanations of the data, but only one explanation is chosen, we cannot see necessity in why that theory was chosen. The answer to all such questions of necessity is voluntarism. We just did what we wanted to do. We willed it in one way because we are free to will, and that requires no further necessary explanation. Science is an institution comprised of people. Those people are not bound to establish the rational necessity of their choices. They can choose to create and mold science in whichever way they deem fit. Of course, they choose whatever works for them. Thus, all the laws of religion, science, and society are devoid of the principle of necessity and sufficient reason. Enlightenment took individualism to a whole new level. God was freed from the requirement of sufficient and necessary reasoning. He could do whatever he wished. Hence, we can never ask questions about why something is the way it is. We have to accept that it is the way it is. Similarly, man gets to exercise his freedom in creating social laws. Nobody can ask why the laws are one way and not another. They are simply the will of the people. After all, if God is not bound by necessity, then people in the world are also not bound by necessity. Now, very few people at present know that modern science lacks necessity. David Hume, a famous critic of science during Enlightenment, remarked that the laws of science could be called sufficient but not necessary. Another law could explain the same observations differently. In 20th century philosophy, this came to be known as the underdetermination problem. The phenomena underdetermine the theory. Then, all the laws of science were also discovered to be lacking sufficiency. For example, when two particles collide, the particles can split into many particles or merge into one particle. Classical physics cannot explain what happens. Indeterminism is a basic feature of all laws. It means that the laws of science lack both necessity and sufficiency. If these laws are called God's laws, then even God doesn't fully predict what will happen or explain why it happens one way and not another. The indeterminism of science now becomes God's ignorance of what happens and how. Therefore, anyone who says that enlightenment broke away from faith towards rationality doesn't know what enlightenment is. Enlightenment did not bring rationality, it only broke the monopoly on power to create laws. The Catholic Church and the kings had that monopoly previously. Enlightenment distributed that power to everyone. But how that power should be used rationally was not clear earlier, and it was not clear afterwards. People were not giving sufficient reasons and necessity for actions before, and they were not giving it afterwards. Everyone got the freedom to create religious, scientific, and social laws, which only the church or the kings could do earlier. Enlightenment was therefore not a rationality movement. It was a political movement to distribute power. Enlightenment was a way to put checks and balances on the power of the church and the kings. Many powerful institutions were created after that. For example, today we can see how military is one institution and judiciary is another. Earlier they were combined into the monarchic institution. The academic system is one institution and religion is separate from that. Earlier both were combined by the church. People can create their own institutions, and there are millions of such institutions at present. Earlier, monarchy and church were the only institution. By distributing power and dividing institutions, each institution's power was limited by the other institutions. But fundamentally, each institution works in its own interest. They don't have to justify their actions based on rational necessity or sufficient reason. They can do whatever they want because at the root of enlightenment is divine voluntarism and ethical voluntarism. When God's actions are not justified by reason, then the actions of people who follow this God are also not required to justify their actions. The modern scientific concept of law is drawn from the concept of law in Judaism. According to Judaism, God gave Moses the Ten Commandments. God did not explain to Moses why those specific commandments and no others. God did not explain why only 10 commandments and not 20. Then, if God had given just 10 commandments, then it is not clear why people made up thousands of additional laws later on. Why not be satisfied with just the 10 commandments? Nobody can ask why these laws and why not other laws, or why a certain number of laws. It is just the way things are. Due to the absence of rational necessity, these laws were called contracts between man and God. There is no rational necessity in a contract. It is just the way God willed humanity to live, and if man agreed to follow God's laws, then he would get a place in heaven. Otherwise, he will go to hell. The contractual conception of religion makes it impossible for anyone to understand religion. But this is not unique to religion. The same problem exists in science too. We cannot seek the necessity for natural laws. Moreover, none of the laws that modern science has created are sufficient to explain what actually happens. Every law till date created by science has been indeterministic. Therefore, the laws are neither necessary nor sufficient. Thus, at the heart of all laws, whether they are religious, scientific, or social, is the absence of necessity and sufficiency. The laws of science keep changing. Science is nothing more than the current consensus. If tomorrow that consensus changes, then the laws of science would also change. A law of science is nothing more than a contract between scientists. They have agreed to use the current laws. They do not establish the necessity or sufficiency of these laws. That is because in the entire history of laws, beginning with Judaism, the laws have never been necessary or sufficient. Science just borrowed the religious concept of law and inherited the absence of necessity and sufficiency. Science extended the religious contractual conception of law and defined science as current man made contracts. The contractual idea of religious, scientific, and social laws is in turn rooted in the concept of separated individuals. Each individual exists for itself. They can create their personal truths, morals, and pleasures. This idea was enshrined during Enlightenment through the notion of free individuals. Each free individual is capable of entering into self serving contracts with other individuals. Each individual acts in its own self interest rather than the collective interest. That own interest is also not a permanent interest, it is just the current and temporary interest. Therefore, even a specific self-interest which drives a particular contract is not expected to be stable or long-lasting. Based on convenience, the laws could be one thing today and something else tomorrow. Due to this individualistic idea of the self, Christians rejected the existence of wholes. For example, the word society does not denote a singular thing. The word society is just the collection of free individuals. Similarly, the word universe does not denote a singular reality. The universe just means a collection of free particles. From this reduction of the whole to the parts emerged the idea that all ordinary words in ordinary language are just collections of things. For example, table and chair are not singular things. They are just collections of many free particles. From the belief in the reduction of reality to independent and separated parts, almost the entirety of set theory and modern mathematics was developed. The reductionism of modern science arose from the idea of free individuals in Christianity. The individualism of religion became the reductionism of science. Self-interested individuals bound by contracts became independent particles bound by laws. In all traditional cultures, the universe was thought of as an organism. Society was a body in which parts worked for the benefit of the whole. But in Christianity and modern science, the universe is not an organism. It is a collection of independent particles. Similarly, society is not a body in which different parts work for the benefit of the whole. Society is a collection of free individuals who work for their self-interest rather than collective interest. In fact, there is no such thing as collective interest. Whatever we call the collective good is nothing but the sum of individual goods. Thus, when the idea of contracts was introduced in religion and science, individualism came along with it. As individualism became entrenched, it destroyed the concepts of holism of the universe and society. Yet another feature of modern science is its idea of uniformity. The fact is that there is no uniformity in nature. No two apples or oranges are alike. No two people are alike. No two places on earth are alike. No two times are alike. When the universe has infinite uniqueness, then we cannot reduce this uniqueness into a finite mathematical formula. The infinite amount of unique information in the universe requires an infinite formula. In fact, the formula that describes an infinitely unique universe must be the size of the universe. No human can ever come up with that formula, nor can anyone comprehend that formula, even if it was given to us by God or a Messiah. Therefore, mathematics is infinitely incapable of capturing an infinitely unique universe within a formula. To know the universe, we have to shrink infinite uniqueness in the universe into something finite. Abrahamic religions and European society did not know how to reduce the infinite to finite. So they called infinite diversity as something evil. They could not live with diversity. Wherever diversity existed, there was discrimination, persecution, and oppression. Where diversity existed, there were wars. People speaking different languages hated each other. If universe was infinitely diverse, then the universe must be at perpetual war with itself. How can there be order in nature? Abrahamic religions and European culture solved this problem by abrogating diversity. They replaced diversity with uniformity. All the places in the universe are the same. All the times in the past, present, or future are the same. Everywhere the same kind of matter exists, the same mathematical laws of nature apply to all places, times, and things. There is no truth in this claim. Different countries in Europe are not the same. They have been involved in wars for a long time because they were different and could not accept each other. They created some uniformity by fiat. If we try to create uniformity by fiat, the question is whose ideology should be uniformly applied to everyone? Who should give up their ideology? Wars ensued because nobody knew the answer. Therefore, to say that the universe is uniform is preposterous. It has no rational or empirical foundation. But it was certainly an aspirational state for Europeans to end wars between them. If only they could become uniform, then they will not have to fight wars with each other. Even Christianity aspired to make the world uniform by spreading its rule to the whole world. Through the Christian rule, it was presumed that a common set of religious principles would be universalized to the whole of humanity. This was the cherished and stated dream of Christianity. Science simply accepted this aspirational state of Christianity and European society as the true state of the entire universe. They assumed that God made a mathematical world and the same laws of mathematics apply everywhere. They did not ask whether it was true, but we can ask if the same laws apply everywhere, then why is nature so diverse everywhere? Why do different places have rivers, mountains, seas, and islands when it could be a uniform slush of soil and water everywhere? Why are different species of life found in different places? Why does different kind of vegetation grow everywhere? Why are people, cultures, languages, civilizations, ideologies, and religions so diverse? This diversity should not exist in a world if all the places, times, and things are the same and the same laws govern the world. The mere existence of enormous diversity on the earth falsifies the mathematical conception of a uniform reality. The reason that science disregarded this diversity is because its ideology comes from Christianity, where everything other than their society and culture is evil. All civilizations, ideologies, religions, people, and ideas other than European culture were called inferior or evil. The universalism of Christianity became the universalism of science. Of course, there is no truth in universalism. Universalism is an oversimplistic picture of reality. Reality is infinitely more complex. The truth is not one, the truth is infinite. These infinite truths have to be laddered into a hierarchy to say which truth is the better truth. For example, sickness and suffering are true, but they are not the best truth. Health and happiness are a better truth. If mathematics govern nature, then either sickness or health must not exist. Either sickness or health must be present uniformly. But since both exist, therefore nature is not uniform. And yet, health is a better truth than sickness. Therefore, nobody wants sickness, everybody wants health. By this preference, we can find worse truths, better truths, and best truths. It is not true versus false, it is worse, better, and best truths. Diversity negates mathematical uniformity, but diversity tells us about the hierarchy of truths. The many truths are not equally true. Even as health and sickness are true, health is a better truth than sickness. Therefore, we must aspire to find the best truth rather than equate all the truths. But Enlightenment thinking abrogated diversity and imposed uniformity due to Christian universalism. We can put all these ideas together into a single comprehensive picture comprised of three core ideas in modern science. These are a uniform universe, reductionism or individualism, and contract laws. Everyday observation negates the idea of a uniform universe, so the idea is contrary to observation. Contract laws make it impossible to seek the necessity of any law. Therefore, they are contrary to reason. Reductionism or individualism deny the existence of wholes and reject the unity of nature, life, society, or the universe. They are contrary to all traditional ways of thinking in which reality was unified as an organism, society was unified as a body, and life was unified as a family. Thus, something contrary to reason and observation and fundamentally opposed to all traditional civilizational wisdom was designated enlightenment. Europeans were so impressed with their creation that they thought they must universalize this false ideology to the rest of the world. Most people who have not analyzed the foundations of science tend to ask, if science was so utterly flawed, then how has it produced so much helpful technology? This question can be answered through an analogy. Suppose you stand at a train station and observe the arrival and departure of trains. You can catalog the arrival and departure times and create a mathematical formula that correctly predicts the arrival and departure times of the trains. If the trains arrive and depart on time, then your mathematical formula will work. You might call this mathematical formula the law of the moving trains and claim that trains are working according to this law. This is a false claim. The trains are running on time because there are train drivers, station masters, train operational authority, and a government that manages the system. The variables in the mathematical formula ignore the train drivers, station masters, operational authority, and government. And yet the formula works most of the time. To know that this formula is false, we have to look at those cases when the trains don't arrive or depart on time. We cannot explain that aberration based on the mathematical formula. To explain all the aberrations when trains don't run on time, we have to invoke train drivers, station masters, operational authority, and the government. In the same way, the fact that formulas work doesn't mean they are true. These formulas are just like the law of moving trains. Factually, the law of moving trains doesn't apply to moving cars, moving boats, or moving airplanes. Therefore, science formulates separate laws for each type of motion. There is one law of moving trains, another law of moving cars, another law of moving boats, and yet another law of flying airplanes. In this way, science creates thousands of laws which work in some limited domain of observation. The problem with these laws cannot be discovered unless we seek an explanation of why things don't work as predicted by the mathematical laws. Science ignores those cases when its laws don't work. Many times it calls those cases instrument errors and observer errors. Science ignores all aberrations that occur rarely and accepts only that which is always repeatable. The very methods by which the laws of science could be falsified are disregarded by science. Therefore, anyone who says that science is correct because it has produced so much technology doesn't know that falsehoods also work. Trains don't move according to a law of moving trains, but we can make correct predictions about the train arrival and departure using a law of moving trains. This law appears to be true only if we disregard the cases when the law fails to predict the train arrival and departure correctly. The failing law cannot be fixed by adding variables to the mathematical equation because nothing in that law is true. It is just a figment of our imagination. Just as modern science was produced from Christian theological assumptions, similarly, the Vedic science is produced from a different set of theological assumptions. Most people at present feel shy in talking about the Vedic science because they have accepted the universality of the Christian science. Modern science has successfully decoupled itself from Christianity by obscuring its religious origins. Even if you study a college course on the history and philosophy of science, you will not be taught about how modern science came out of Christian theology. You will just get information about Greek philosophy, the origins of calculus, the history of mathematical logic, or the history of instrumentation. Nobody will tell you about the Christian origins of modern science. By separating itself from Christian theology, modern science has created a picture of itself as a rational and empirical endeavor when all its core assumptions are Christian theology. Those who don't know the history of science think that science is rational and empirical, while religions are based on faith and belief. Hence, they accept the universality of Christian science and think that a Vedic science is a contradiction of terms because it mixes faith with reason. Even many advocates of Vedic science have not been able to accept that there are many alternative kinds of sciences based on different theological assumptions. So they think that the Vedic science must only have discovered earlier what Christian science discovered later. In this way, the universalism of modern science is simply taken for granted because the true history of science is unknown. The fact is that all the assumptions of Christian science are rejected in the formulation of Vedic science. Take, for example, the concept of law. Unlike thousands of laws in modern science, there is only one law in the Vedic science. We can call it the law of choice and responsibility. It is also called dharma, karma, reincarnation, and so on. The law simply states that every choice is reciprocated with a proportionate responsibility. Therefore, if you choose to hurt others, then you will be hurt in return. If you perform charity, then you will receive things in charity proportionate to what you have given away in charity before. Under this law, the material world is not objects, it is simply potentials. Through choice, we pick one potential. When one potential is picked, all logically opposed potentials are naturally hidden. We can call this the cake principle. We cannot eat our cake and have it too. Eating the cake is a choice enabled by the cake potential. If we make that choice, then the cake potential goes back to the invisible state where we cannot choose it anymore. We can talk about the necessity of this singular law. The necessity is simply that there is justice in nature. Nature has purpose and morality. Therefore, when we make a choice, nature records the choice and generates the future potentials. If we make immoral choices, then future potentials are limited to our punishment. If we make moral choices, then future potentials are limited to our rewards. Nobody can punish us if we have been moral. Nobody can reward us if we have been immoral. This is the natural principle of justice, which we also call tit for tat. The government may fail to give us justice, but nature will get us justice. In fact, there will be a justice for a government that fails to deliver justice, because the government is morally bound by justice. This is a high level idea of lawfulness in the Vedic system. There are hundreds of details about how this law works, but there is one law, not thousands of laws. The law is justified by the principle of natural justice. The fact is that nobody can accept injustice against themselves. They might do injustice to others, but they cannot accept injustice on themselves. Therefore, everyone wants and accepts the principle of natural justice. It is not imposed by God upon humans from the outside. It is innately present in each individual as their desire to get justice. Injustice is irrational. This law of natural justice can be universalized to all times, places, situations, and persons. Even as God is omnipotent, even He binds Himself by the principle of justice. It means that God doesn't do any injustice. God's omnipotence is not contrary to justice. God is not irresponsible. He acts responsibly. It means that if he does something by his will, he takes responsibility for doing it. He accepts the consequences of his actions. He doesn't blame others or push the consequences of his actions onto others. The contradiction between omnipotence and justice doesn't exist. Similarly, natural justice is not a contractual law. We cannot negotiate arbitrary contracts in which give and take are imbalanced. We cannot arm twist someone to give us a preferential contract. Natural justice ensures that the true value of giving and taking must always be balanced. If we have given value, we will receive value. If we have taken value, value will be taken from us. In contrast to the least action principle, we can call dharma the best action principle. It means that to get the best result, we have to do the best action. The actions can be graded as worse, better, and best. Similarly, the results can be graded as worse, better, and best. We don't need faith in a contract with God. Justice is what everyone wants, and nature is simply giving what everyone wants. Life would be unbearable if natural justice was false. Therefore, to make life happy, everyone must accept the natural justice principle of choice and responsibility and do the best actions. At the heart of Vedic science is the personalization of all reality. Nature is also personalized. Therefore, rivers, mountains, lands, and seas are all persons. Trees, birds, fishes, insects, reptiles, beasts, and humans are all persons. All ecosystems, societies, planets, and the entire universe are the bodies of a person. A body is defined simply as all that a person can control. Due to this personalization, the concept of free individuals doesn't exist in Vedic science. For example, if we are living inside some planet, then we are not free. We are controlled by what happens in the planet, which is controlled by a demigod. Events like rain and sunshine, drought and pestilence, day and night are also controlled by demigods. If we are living in a body, the different functions of our body, such as digestion, breathing, and immunity, are controlled by different demigods. Basically, our body is a part of many other bodies because it is under the control of other living entities. Our bodies are not mutually exclusive. We are not free to do whatever we want. We are controlled in millions of ways by other living entities that we remain unaware of. Personalization depends on a semantic conception of reality. For example, let's suppose that there is a red, round, and sweet apple. Words like red, round, sweet, and apple are universal concepts in the sense that many instances of each of these exist. Now let's personalize these concepts. There is a person whose body is the concept of redness, another person whose body is the concept of roundness, another person whose body is the concept of sweetness, and yet another person whose body is the concept of appleness. All these persons are called demigods. There are 330 million such demigods. They constitute a complete system of concepts. We can say that 330 million is the size of the conceptual dictionary. When a red, round, and sweet apple is created, concepts from different demigod bodies are taken and joined into a single thing we call an apple. Those concepts then become the body of the apple. Therefore, the properties of redness, roundness, sweetness, and appleness do not exclusively belong to just one thing we call an apple. They are also simultaneously part of the bodies of different demigods. By partaking concepts, the apple becomes a part of many demigod bodies simultaneously. We cannot visualize this simple idea in physics because an apple is just like a person simultaneously sitting on many chairs called redness, roundness, sweetness, and appleness. In physics, one thing can only be in one place. Physics requires a person to exclusively sit on only one chair. Therefore, demigods cannot be part of my body, and I cannot be part of the demigod body. All the bodies must be mutually exclusive. But when we take a semantic view of reality, then mutual exclusion disappears. Now, apple body is a part of demigod body, and demigod body is a part of apple body. These bodies are just like chairs. The person sitting on the chairs are sharing that chair. The concept of private property disappears. Our body is itself a shared or community property. Therefore, we cannot say that the apple is an independent, separated thing. The thing we call an apple is a part of many classes such as redness, roundness, sweetness, and appleness. All these concepts are defined in a hierarchy, which is like an inverted tree whose root is at the top and which diversifies into many trunks, branches, twigs, and leaves. The parts of the tree are not free particles or free individuals. They are all integrated together into a single whole. Therefore, the concept of free individual and free particle is rejected in Vedic science and replaced by integrated individuals. The whole universe is one organism. Within that organism are many other organisms, within which are many other organisms. An organism is the model of all of reality. The Vedic science doesn't model reality as independent particles, objects, or individuals. It models them as parts of a whole. The collective interest is the individual interest in this system. Uniformity in modern science was created by assuming that there are very few physical properties and those properties exist in everything. For example, in classical mechanics, the entire universe is just particles with just two properties called position and momentum. In contrast, in the Vedic science, there are 330 million properties, each personified by a different demigod. The demigods are not eternal. They temporarily receive a particular body to control a particular property. It is like a person sitting on a chair temporarily who gains hegemony over that chair. The vocabulary of classical mechanics comprises a few words like particle, position, and momentum. However, the vocabulary of the Vedic science is enormous because there are 330 million properties. All these properties don't exist in everything. The bitter gourd doesn't have the property of sweetness, unlike an apple. Water doesn't have a smell, unlike an apple. The universe is infinitely diverse because different property combinations exist in different places. No two apples or oranges are identical. No two humans are identical. No two places or times are identical. That is because every place in the universe is a unique combination of properties. These property combinations keep changing over time such that no two times have the exact same property combination. We can imagine the number of property combinations created from 330 million properties. The universe is the potentiality of all the valid property combinations. Since the universe is infinitely unique, therefore, any attempt to reduce the universe to a few concepts like particle, position, and momentum is immeasurably incomplete. We simply cannot reduce the complexity created by 330 million properties to the complexity created by two properties. Since science tries to do this reduction, therefore it becomes a mockery. The mockery is seen in the fact that science has to create thousands of laws that work for different subsets of phenomena, and that too not always. If we try to merge those thousands of laws into one law, Or if we try to explain the cases when the mathematical laws don't work, then we will require 330 million properties. Anything less than that would be incomplete in one way or another. This is why those who understand the complexity of the universe call the theories of modern science the vision of a frog in a well. A frog in the well thinks that the whole universe must be like its well. For example, modern science creates its theories of particle motion based on the study of billiard balls. It creates theories of wave motion based on the study of water waves or string vibrations. Then science tries to universalize these theories because it has assumed that the whole universe is just one type of thing. Basically, the vision of the scientist is limited to billiard balls and water waves. This is the well in which the frog scientist lives. He imagines that the whole universe is just like billiard balls and water waves and creates a farcical theory of reality. In complete contrast to modern science, or shall we say Christian science, the Vedic science describes the universe in terms of infinite uniqueness, integrated individuals, and non contractual laws. The infinite uniqueness is empirically observable. The non contractual laws are rationally justifiable, and integrated individuals is the result of seeing everything in terms of concepts. The conceptual semantic vision of reality cannot be captured in any mathematical law. However, it can be described in terms of an alternative science of semantics and personhood. We will not try to cover the science of personhood here because it will take us away from the present focus, which is to understand how an alternative science is created from an alternative religion. The Vedic religion talks about choice and responsibility. It talks about individuals living as part of a family, body, or organism. And it talks about literally infinite uniqueness in the universe. In contrast, Christian science replaces choice and responsibility with contractual covenants with God. It emphasizes the radical individualism and freedom of each individual, and it makes the universe uniform. Science replaces a semantic worldview with a physical worldview. Science replaces personalization of nature with depersonalization. Science replaces the rationally justified and necessary law of choice and responsibility with the rationally unjustifiable and unnecessary concept of a contract between man and God. The sciences are so different because the religions are so. Having discussed in detail the differences between Christian and Vedic sciences and how they arise from different religious ideologies, we can now talk about a broader idea that generalizes this principle from just two sciences and religions to infinitely many sciences and religions. The basic idea is very simple. A world image is created from a self image. Each person can choose a different self image and use that to create a different world image. Therefore, the universalism of science or religion is simply a false idea. There are infinite possible sciences and religions. Of course, these are not equally good or true sciences and religions. They may not be completely bad or false either. They can be graded along a ladder of worse, better, and best sciences and religions. The worse science and religion fails to explain most of our experiences. The better science and religion explains more of our experiences. The best science and religion explains everything. Therefore, we can talk about worse truth, better truth, and best truth. It is not true versus false. It is a ladder of truths that go progressively from worst to best. This idea of science and religion can be easily understood based on the process of creation given in Sankhya philosophy. We will first cover the process of creation of materialism and then cover the process of the creation of spiritualism. Materialism begins from the core idea in each person that he or she is an enjoyer free to seek its pleasure. This idea is also the opening statement of the US Constitution, which begins by stating this, quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." End quote. The fact is that the Creator has not given us any inalienable rights. If we had the inalienable right to life, then why are so many people dying? If we had the inalienable right to liberty, then why are so many people in prison? If we had the inalienable right to happiness, then why are so many people unhappy? The reason is simple. God gave us no rights. However, the living entity thinks that it has the right to enjoy. So he creates a constitution under which this right is enshrined as a law. That law has no truth to it. The imaginary or fictitious law under which each person is an enjoyer is called pradhana. The word pradhana means the chief, ruler, or master. My rulership or mastery means that everything other than me is a slave, and I am the master of these slaves. Of course, it is all stupidity and nonsense. But everyone thinks in this manner. Therefore, this falsehood exists as the basis of material reality. From this primordial idea of mastery, three kinds of differentiations are produced successively, which are called Prakriti, Mahatattva, and Ahankara. Prakriti is all the desires for enjoyment. Mahatattva is all that one has to sacrifice to get that enjoyment. Ahankara is the various potentials for enjoyment. We can summarize these three creations as desiring, deserving, and possibility. Each person seeks a different kind of enjoyment. That is the desire compressed into Prakriti. Each person has to give something to get pleasure. That is the deserving compressed into Mahatattva. Each person needs some possibility of enjoyment to enjoy. These possibilities are compressed into Ahankara. Due to Prakriti, the world appears to be good and pleasurable. Due to Mahatattva, the world appears to be righteous or just. Due to Ahankara, the world appears to be true or real. Thus, an illusion of good, right, and truth is created from Pradhana. One of the peculiarities of Sankhya is that everything exists in three modes. We can call these the seer, seen, and seeing. We can also call them the self, the other, and their relation. For example, Pradhana has to be understood in three ways. These are the ideas that I am a master, the world is a slave, and this slave works for me. Similarly, Prakriti has to be understood in three ways. These are the ideas that I have desires to enjoy, the world is desirable and enjoyable things, and those things will fulfill my desires. Then Mahatattva has to be understood in three ways. These are the ideas that I am worthy of enjoyment, that the world is worth enjoying, and my worth matches the worth of the world. Finally, Ahankara has to be understood in three ways. These are the ideas that I am capable of enjoying, the world exists as the potentiality of enjoyment, and my capability to enjoy perfectly matches the ways in which the world is enjoyable. The three modes of nature are the reflections of the tripartite distinction in the self called Sat Chit Anand. The Anand component becomes the self, the Chit component becomes the world, and the Sat component becomes the relation between the two. We can compare this idea of creation to a shopping mall. We go into a shopping mall because we have desires. We go into the shopping mall when we have the money to pay for things. Finally, the shopping mall is the possibilities of enjoyable things that I have to pay for in case I want the pleasure. Pradhana is the idea that I am the enjoyer. Prakriti is all the desires for enjoyment. Mahatattva is the value that I have to sacrifice to get value. Ahankara is the embodiment of that value which has to be given and taken for me to fulfill my desires of enjoyment. Thus, over four steps called Pradhana, Prakriti, Mahatattva, and Ahankara, the desire for enjoyment becomes a specific product. If we get that product, then we feel fulfilled, satisfied, and contented. If we cannot get that product, then we feel depressed, angry, or frustrated. Thus, an innately happy person becomes dependent on other things for its happiness. He spends his entire life trying to become a master by acquiring material things for which there is a big price to pay, and to pay for those things he has to toil like a slave. The person who was thinking that I am the master of the world now becomes a slave of the world because he has to pay for what he takes. In just four steps of progressive manifestation, the mastery is transformed into slavery. This experience of mastery and slavery gives rise to theories about the world. If a person thinks that he is a master, then he imagines that he can force the world to bend to its will. If he thinks he is a slave, then he imagines that he is being forced to bend to the world's will. If the person gave up this idea of mastery and slavery, he would be free. But he is bound by his own desire for mastery, transformed into slavery. And he imagines that the world is working because he is forcing the world to bend to its will, or the world is forcing its will on him. This oppressive idea of the world is the materialistic conception of the world, and it springs out of the Ahankara. This materialistic conception is the belief system of the person under mastery slavery. It is called the Buddhi. Once the idea of mastery slavery is accepted as the default way the world works, then a person starts creating theories about various kinds of mastery and slavery. In all these theories, one object pushes or pulls the other objects, and the world works due to coercion. The coercive picture of the world now becomes completely opposed to the free idea of the self. All the theories of science that describe the world in terms of objects and forces are byproducts of the basic belief system of mastery and slavery. When this science is confirmed by observation through the senses, then a person forgets that he was originally free. He starts denying the very possibility of free will or choice and becomes an automaton. Freedom is then transformed into determinism. Whatever we call material science or modern science today is the result of the selfish idea of enjoyment by becoming the master of the world, which is slowly transformed into slavery, and science elevates the false ideas of mastery and slavery to the truth, denying the actual truth that we are free. Freedom is neither mastery nor slavery. But if freedom is equated to mastery, then it is transformed into its opposite of slavery. This is good because nature refutes a false idea by producing a self contradiction when desire for mastery transformed into the reality of slavery. However, in another sense, mastery slavery is not false. It is just not a great idea. It is an inferior truth. A better truth is that we can be free of slavery provided we can give up the desire for mastery. The spiritual understanding of the same reality begins with the realization that I am presently not free. I am rather bound by mastery slavery. This realization gives rise to the desire in a person to become free of mastery and slavery. The desire for freedom is called mukti or liberation in Vedic texts. A free person neither desires to become a master of others, nor is he ready to become someone else's slave. The Vedic texts describe how a world of free individuals exists beyond the material world of mastery slavery. In this world, each person lives with similar or compatible persons. They do things for each other without trying to dominate others or be dominated by them. It is a perfectly egalitarian society. The material world is not egalitarian, it is mastery and slavery. Those who get exhausted and tired by this process of mastery and slavery seek freedom, and if they give up the desire for mastery, then they enter the world free of slavery. However, in the Vedic text, there is a world even beyond the free world, in which the living entities are again bound to each other by love and devotion. A person bound by love desires to serve another person. The other person accepts that service out of love and reciprocates with greater love and service. The person receiving service doesn't want to dominate anyone because he is receiving love voluntarily. The person giving service doesn't feel dominated by others because he is giving love voluntarily. Love is not mastery and slavery, it is giving and receiving voluntarily. The spiritual world also follows the same stages of creation. The self has the desire for love and service. Then the counterpart of pradhana is that I exist in a world where I give and receive love and service. Then there are three manifestations of pradhana which we can analogously call prakriti, mahatattva and ahankara. Prakriti is all the desires of loving and serving. Mahatattva is all that one needs to do to become qualified to give and receive a particular type of love and service. Ahankara is all the possibilities for loving and serving that a person is capable of giving and receiving. Again, the world divides into desiring, deserving, and possibility. However, the desire for loving and serving is never frustrated. Therefore, a person never becomes angry, frustrated, or depressed. He is dependent on something other than himself, and yet this dependence doesn't result in unhappiness because the dependence is not on selfish persons but rather on selfless persons. From this understanding of dependence that is always pleasing arises the assumptions, theories, and confirmation of the world. The assumption is that the world is persons served by me. The theories are various kinds of persons and services. The confirmation is the acceptance and reciprocation of service. Since love is always reciprocated, therefore the assumptions and theories are never falsified. The inherent contradiction between mastery and slavery is absent. The contradiction is replaced by the consistency between loving service and its reciprocation. The contrast between the Vedic and Christian worldviews can be summarized simply as selfless and selfish. The desire for mastery is selfish. The desire for service is selfless. The selfish attitude in Christianity is seen through its numerous doctrines. For example, in the social sphere, we see that Christian nations created the dogma of a Bill of Rights. They claim that God gave man the right to enjoy. But Christianity did not extend the same rights to birds, trees, beasts, rivers, mountains, lands, or seas. Flora and fauna exist for man to exploit. They don't have any rights. Only man has rights. In fact, Christianity and other Abrahamic religions depersonalize nature to the point where birds, trees, and beasts don't even have a soul. They are not even persons. Their sole purpose of existence is fulfilling man's needs. Only man is alive and uniquely blessed by God with rights to exploit and enjoy the rest of nature. This is the beginning of selfishness. This selfishness was then extended from nature to non Christians. For example, Christianity rationalized its atrocities and colonization through its discovery doctrines. The conquest of other nations, killing their people and stealing their wealth, was called God's work of spreading Christianity. Supposedly, God gave Christians the right to enslave and subjugate the whole world. Then, by extending the Christian idea of contractual relationships between man and God, even relationships between Christians became contractual. Thereby, Christians are not bound to each other by love and brotherhood. They only exist for their selfish ends. Marriage is a contract. Employment is a contract. Government is a contract. In each contract, each person just does what is best for them. They don't think about love or duty or morality. They are solely driven by their selfish desires and fully empowered to force one sided contracts upon others. Finally, Christianity normalized selfish immorality by propounding a theory of sin forgiveness. To begin with, man is not sinful due to its own fault. Rather, man is sinful because its ancestors, namely Adam and Eve, were sinful. Then man is so sinful that he can never correct himself. Man can receive salvation only by God's forgiveness. In fact, God is so forgiving that he sacrifices his only Son for the benefit of mankind. Meanwhile, you can also have the sins forgiven by confessing them to a priest in private. Then, as a person is elevated to a status of a priest, he can forgive his sins by confessing them to himself in private. In this way, sins are normalized by blaming ancestors, giving them a religious or spiritual cover, and forgiving them by confession. This critique of Christianity is not the critique of Jesus. Jesus taught love and brotherhood, sacrifice and service. He did not teach sin forgiveness by confession. He did not ask anyone to colonize the world to spread his message. He did not teach that trees or animals have no soul. He never said that mankind's sins would be forgiven by his death. In fact, Jesus never said that he is God. He did not advance any contractual relationship between man and God. He rejected all political conceptions of religion by separating God from Caesar. All the problematic ideas of Christianity were added to Christianity by bringing in Jewish and Greek ideas into the teachings of Jesus. Therefore, the criticism of Christianity should not be equated to the criticism of Jesus. They are not the same. We can contrast all these ideas to the religious ideas in the Vedic system. For example, in the social sphere, God did not give any man any rights. God only gave man duties. Doing their duty is their only right. This duty can be performed lovingly, but even if there is no love, man is bound by duty and responsibility for its own sake. Every action brings a responsibility. God gave man free will to choose a different kind of duty and service. The duty and responsibility are not coerced. There is a choice for man to pick his type of duty. However, once a duty is picked, it must be executed responsibly. We cannot pick a duty that we want and then run away from that duty when it becomes inconvenient. We chose the duty and we bear the responsibility. God did not make man sinful due to ancestry. Man made himself sinful by its selfishness and desire for domination and mastery over others. This desire is to be renounced through duty and service. If we find duty burdensome, then we can completely renounce the material world and desire for mastery and become liberated. If we then want to live in intimate relationships, then we have to accept the idea of loving service. Under that loving service, duty doesn't seem burdensome. It becomes the source of joy and pleasure because love is also reciprocated. Finally, there is no rationalization of sin. Every sinner is punished in proportionate measure to his sins. Even if you escape the results of your sins in this life, you will receive another body and life where you will have to endure the results of your sins. Sinning is not just discouraged through advocacy of duty and responsibility, it is also condemned through punishment. Science is just the superficial and perceivable reflection of deeply held attitudes in religion. The deeply held religious attitudes can be selfish or selfless. The soul can desire domination or service. The soul can be lusty or loving. From the selfish idea of the self springs the desire for control over others. The selfish person makes himself mutually exclusive to other persons. From this exclusivity arises the separation of individuals and the reductionism of the whole into parts. Exclusivity leads to competition between individuals and the use of coercion and forces on others. The deeply held religious attitudes of selfishness gradually transform themselves into the ideas of depersonalization, exploitation, and coercion. The world is modeled as objects to be exploited for selfish pleasure rather than persons to be served by oneself for their pleasure. Any disconnection between science and religion is misleading because the connections are plain and simple. The inconsistency and incompleteness we see in modern science are the direct results of a selfish attitude in Christianity. Since each person considers himself separate from other persons, therefore he models the world in a fragmented way. That fragmented way is false because reality is integrated. Therefore, all fragmented theories of nature are false. That falsehood is seen when the fragmented theory fails to explain the working of nature. But the proponent of fragmentation doesn't change his ways. He quietly ignores the failures as instrument error or observer error. Then all these fragmented models of reality remain inconsistent with the models created by other selfish individuals who chose to create other fragmented models of reality out of selfishness. A picture of reality created from selfishness appears inconsistent and incomplete. The inconsistency is between persons. The incompleteness is in each person. Selfish people fight with each other because of their individualism. Each selfish person feels hollow and empty precisely because he has eliminated all other persons from his worldview. When each person is hollow and each person is conflicted with other persons, then how can their picture of reality be consistent and complete? The picture of reality created by a selfish person simply inherits the contradictions that person feels with other persons. The picture of reality created by a selfish person is incomplete because that person is incomplete as a result of eliminating all other persons. A person has to feel complete before he can understand the world completely. A person must attain consistency with other complete persons before he can see consistency in the world. Therefore, the incompleteness and inconsistency in science is not a flaw of nature. It is the flaw in the vision of the selfish person theorizing about nature. His self image is contradictory with other self images. His self image portrays himself as incomplete. His scientific theories inherit his personal incompleteness and inconsistency. Science is nothing more than a reflection of the person who creates that science. The inner conflict within science is the direct result of the fact that scientists divide reality into artificial boxes they call phenomena. Different subjects are created to study different phenomena in isolation. Physics studies subatomic particles, chemistry studies molecules, and biology studies cells. These subjects don't talk to each other. Thereby, the property of self replication, self defense, and self correction that exists in cells has no foundation in chemistry or physics. Atoms are moving without any purpose in physics, but purpose suddenly appears in biology. We cannot reconcile a purposeless picture of reality in physics with a purposeful picture of reality in biology. To explain this discrepancy, biology postulates that purpose emerges in nature randomly. Thus, a contradiction between the determinism of mathematical laws in physics and the randomness in biology is created, which can never be resolved no matter how hard we try. Reality cannot be divided into artificial boxes like physics, chemistry, and biology. But the selfishness of the person narrows their focus into a small box where they cannot and do not want to see any other box. Selfishness creates the contradictions between boxes. Selfishness also creates the incompleteness of each theory looking narrowly into a single box to the exclusion of all other boxes. The reductionist approach of modern science is the direct result of its individualism, and it creates mutually contradictory boxes, each of which is understood incompletely. Thus, every theory produced by science till date is unable to explain some observed phenomena within its chosen domain. Every theory produced by science contradicts theories of other phenomena. Each theory is incomplete. Each theory is contradictory to some other theories. This is because individualism narrows the focus into artificially created boxes, makes a person disregard the other boxes, and then prompts him to produce incomplete theories of reality that don't comport with theories produced by other persons. One scientist produces a law of moving trains, which doesn't fully explain the working of the trains. Meanwhile, other scientists produce the law of moving cars, airplanes, and boats, which also don't explain their working correctly. The law of moving trains contradicts the law of moving cars, airplanes, and boats. Each of these laws doesn't explain why trains, cars, airplanes, or boats don't always work according to the law. The narrow focus and limited understanding of things within that focus creates mutually contradictory dogmas about reality, which keep changing because they cannot explain the observations fully. As a simple example, cosmology, sociology, and biology have zero commonality. According to cosmology, the universe is not a body and not a society. According to biology, the body is not a universe and not a society. According to sociology, the society is not a universe and not a body. Contradictions between theories is a pervasive norm rather than an exception. The Vedic science demarcates itself from Christian science by creating consistency and completeness. Each theory is consistent with other theories. Each theory is complete. This is because the basic model of reality is an organism, person, or body. Even if someone manufactures a box, their focus inside the box is not contradictory to the focus inside other boxes. Nobody is expected to create a tentative proposal for what they see inside one box if that proposal is expected to contradict the truth of other boxes. Technology is not the measure for finding the truth. This is because a person is not a free individual in Vedic science to do whatever he wants. He is bound by duty and responsibility. Nobody is forced to become a scientist, but if they become a scientist, then they are bound by duty to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Speculation and wild guesses are the hallmarks of selfish people trying to further their careers. They take money from students, but they don't give them the truth. In most cases, something of value is taken, but nothing of value is given. This is why students go to school and college and memorize subjects to pass exams. But when they leave school and college, they forget all that they had memorized earlier. That is because what was given in school or college had no value. It seems utterly ridiculous that a person spends 20 years in formal education, paying his hard earned money, and then forgets most of what he was taught during that education. Education cannot be reformed unless people become duty bound to tell the truth. Such people can bring unity between subjects and the completeness of each subject. The discoveries of one department can be used by other departments. The students undergoing education can then integrate the knowledge from various departments into a single cohesive understanding of the world and themselves. When they live and work in a society, they will bring unity. They will provide good solutions that genuinely solve problems rather than bad solutions that either don't solve the problem or worsen it with new problems. They will learn to see how the world is not divided into man made boxes. Those boxes are simply the figments of academic imagination. As a simple example, cosmology, sociology, and biology are not contradictory subjects in Vedic science. According to Vedic cosmology, the universe is a body and a society. According to Vedic sociology, a society is a universe and a body. According to Vedic biology, the body is a universe and a society. Those studying the society can take the insights from biology and cosmology to enhance their understanding of society. Those studying the cosmos can take insights from biology and sociology to enhance their understanding of the cosmos. Those studying the body can take the insights from cosmology and sociology to enhance their understanding of the body. Each subject facilitates, serves, and enhances the other subjects. As time passes, each subject gets more complete as a result of this cooperation between subjects. As time passes, the differences between the subjects disappear as a result of a shared understanding between them. The root cause of this consistency and completeness is that the scientists are selfless, duty bound, and concerned about others. They are selfless, duty bound, and concerned about others because of religion. If religion doesn't teach selflessness, duty, and love, then science will never be consistent and complete. If religion rationalizes selfishness, oppression, and power over others, then science will never be consistent and complete. That is because the problems of science are simply reflections of the problems of religion. Similarly, the virtues of science are simply a reflection of the virtues of religion. The separation of virtuosity and science is false. When people are selfish, then their science is inconsistent and incomplete. When people are selfless, then their science is consistent and complete. This is not an imaginary proposition. It is intuitive to anyone who is honest and open minded. But it has been made obscure by modernity. Overturning that modernity is not opposition to reason. Opposition to modernity is bringing back humanity to a selfless, duty bound, and loving state. There is no other way to know the truth or reality.